Aloha and welcome to Maui Manao, a question and answer show featuring the Maui Senate Delegation. I'm your host, Alan Texeira, and welcome to this first episode of the 2015 legislative session. Joining us again are the Maui State Senators, Senator J. Connie English, Senator Roz Baker, and Senator Gilbert Keith-agaran. Senators, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again. Before we jump into 2015 session topics, can we discuss the Senate reorganization and the new roles that you have acquired? Please.
I don't have a new role. I'm still chair of the Senate Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee, so I'm enjoying that activity. But yes, my two colleagues here have new roles, and I'm delighted that they're in their new positions.
Well, I'm actually off the Ways and Means Committee, but I'm actually on the Judiciary and Labor Committee this session as chairman.
Excellent.
Yes, and I've become the majority leader for the Senate, and I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, and also the vice chair of the Tourism and International Affairs Committee, and I have one more committee.
Transportation.
Yes, transportation. And the reorganization happens after every election. With new members coming in, we reassign positions, people. New leadership, new positions, new committee chairs, and this is after every election. This happens.
Well, it seems like the Maui delegation turned out well again.
Yes.
Yeah, we think so.
For this year, what do you think of this year's opening day ceremonies?
I enjoyed it. It was a nice theme. It harkened back to reminding us of some of the important things that we need to continue to preserve, the culture, our beautiful natural resources, and really an opportunity to feel good about some of the entertainers and an era that had gone before. I enjoyed it. I thought it was an excellent way to get started. And of course, with that pomp and circumstance, we had some very thoughtful activities that went on that day. And one of them was our new majority program that Senator English spearheaded.
That was actually my next question, Senator. The first ever legislative program was distributed on opening day.
Yes, so the Senate took a very different tack this year on approaching the big issues. We had some briefings in Waikiki from the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, from different think tank organizations. We did some internal processes amongst ourselves about what are the most important things coming to the surface in our districts. And we took all of that and then came up with a document called the Legislative Program, which are three broad areas that we found general agreement on and things that we need to look at. Food resiliency, energy resiliency, effective government. What was the third one? It's been a long day for all of us.
Yeah. We were talking about resiliency in the community, looking at housing and healthcare and those kinds of issues because
community well-being.
Yeah, community well-being. Thank you. Yes, that was it.
So we distributed this program at opening day, and we also have it online, which people can go and look at. But it's become like a policy guidance document for the chairs and for the senators. And also, I found a lot of the people coming in have picked this up and said, well, we meet this, or we meet this, which is what we hoped would have happened. So it's a new way of approaching how we look at the big issues and how we deal with them.
This is different from how traditionally
we've done what's called majority packages, which is a series of bills.
Mm-hmm.
This time what we're looking for are these elements in the bills that are moving. So we didn't designate any particular bills. We're looking for these elements in all the bills as they move ahead.
Very interesting. On our next question, one of your former colleagues has now become the governor, and he gave his first public State of the address. What are your thoughts, or what did you think of his remarks this year?
Well, I thought it was short on words but long on substance. In other words, he talked about some core areas that we needed to deal with. Talked about some very broad ways of dealing with it. So I enjoyed the speech, and I thought that it gave a good framework and good insight in how the new administration will proceed ahead. it also resonated very well with our program. You know, a lot of the things we talked about there, he mentioned in his speech too. So, you know, I think we're on point, and I think there's a lot of areas of agreement.
And some of what he didn't say, I think, was pretty welcome too, because really it sort of set the stage for a lot more collaboration between the legislature and the governor, and really about, you know, it's possible that we have a solution that the administration hasn't thought about, and I think he basically gave us a little bit of license to go ahead and explore those things. And I think part of it is with the hospital issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, he really spoke about the things that were uppermost in my mind to talk about dealing with healthcare issues and energy issues. Healthcare being, of course, very important to Maui Island, Lanai, which is part of Maui region, to make sure that we have sustainable healthcare there. We have a continued effort to make sure that we have the highest quality delivery of service and access to a variety of services so people don't have to come over to Honolulu or to go elsewhere. So that commitment to solving that problem and providing emergency funding for HHSC, I think was very welcome news for me.
For this 2015 session, can we discuss your priorities when you're prioritizing for this session?
Well, I'll start. Because the PUC is going to play a very large role dealing with the merger or acquisition, depending on how you want to characterize it, between Hawaii, HECO, HELCO, and MECO, and Texeira. And so one of the first things my committee will be looking at is confirming the new PUC chair, looking to see if we need to establish some kind of a framework or floor for principles that we want to make sure that this acquisition / merger accomplishes. You know, we want to make sure that the ratepayers and the state of Hawaii are really benefiting from this endeavor, and it's not just the board of directors or the chief officers of the two corporations. So I think it's very important that the due diligence is done, that and we do it in a timely manner, but we also take a look very carefully at what the policy framework is that we want incorporated in that going forward.
Senator Agron?
Well, I think one of the things that I've been asked to look at are our election laws. Are they working well? And in areas where they're not, we need to take a look at that. We have this old, we don't have recounts in Hawaii, so we are looking at a recount. Right now we have a challenge law, which is very hard to do. And so even if you have a close election, there's no right to recount. So we're looking at whether or not we should go ahead and have something that allows someone who lost in a very close race to ask for a recount. I think there are probably people who worked in that campaign or people that supported that person probably would appreciate at least that kind of thing to happen. The other thing that we're working on is what happens in an emergency. I think we saw that this year. Who should make the decision and what kind of decision are we making? I think that's another thing that needs to be discussed. And the third thing is we still have a very low turnout. And so we're looking at whether or not we should look at all-male elections. More and more, we look at it in Maui County, more people are taking advantage of absentee mail, the walk-in process, and a lot more people are signing up to be permanent mail absentee. And so we're looking at how do we implement that if we decide to go in that direction.
I've been working on a series of bills dealing with sustainability and resiliency, things like food resiliency on a large scale. How do we make sure there's enough food in Hawaii in case our shipping lanes go down? How do we distribute that? Looking at things like power and energy and what happens in disasters. So there's a series of bills that we introduced. I think the Maui delegation signed all of them that are moving through now, dealing with the large issues of resiliency.
And of course, all of our committee jurisdictions have other features. You know, I've got professional vocational licensing. There's a lot of updating of statutes, and next week we'll be confirming or considering confirmation for the new head of the DCCA, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. So you have some of those activities going along while you're trying to look at bills and make sure that you're meeting the lateral deadlines, because most of the bills don't get referred just to one committee. So it makes for some long hearings and long hours, but we really appreciate the folks that do take the time to come and testify and give us their thoughts and ideas about the measures that are coming before us.
We're especially glad to hear from people from Maui.
Absolutely.
I think that one of the things that the governor has talked about, and actually was instrumental in, is trying to make the Senate as paperless as possible. That includes allowing a lot more testimony that we have, and testimony from remote.
Right, and so, you know, when Senator Ige became Governor Ige, he took that concept that was developed here and now is looking at expanding the paperless initiative across the whole of government, which, you know, the Senate, we've been paperless for a while now. It took a little bit of getting used to, but
2006 was our first year.
Yes, and once we did paperless, we never wanted to go back. So, you know, this is a great initiative.
It'll save us lots of money too, from a statewide perspective.
And trees.
And trees. But the other thing it will do by going paperless, let's just look at the tax department as a for instance. You'll have an opportunity to file your taxes, to get feedback. You can already at DCCA go online to file your business registration, but more and more of those systems that don't have to have a face-to-face interaction. Not only does it allow our state employees to go on to more productive and valuable work in their departments, but it also saves time for our customers as well.
You know, this year we had, I think, 1,350 some odd bills introduced in the Senate, and the House was about 1,500. And of those, you know, about maybe 300 make it to crossover, and then at the end of the day, probably about 150 are left for conference. So imagine all of that in paper before, and now we've taken all of that away, and we're using our devices to access. So it brings us to a larger question of broadband. You know, do we have enough broadband to support this switch to technology? Yes, we're going to save a lot of trees, a lot of paper, but now we have to make sure that the broadband is in place to handle this switch across the state. So that's a big issue here at the legislature this year.
And it also brings up the question of retaining those electronic documents, and can the documents be considered the same value as a paper document? So it brings a lot of questions that we've got to resolve. One of the bills I heard this morning had to do with what happens to your electronic records after you die. And there is a proposal for a uniform, from the Uniform Laws Commission, that talks about how that should be done. Well, the ACLU and some of the others had a very different vision. So we're in a new era, having to look at and revisit some of the, laws that would pass of the heirs, how do things pass on to other people, and who has restrictions around that. So it's a new era that all of the technology is bringing to the fore.
Absolutely. So it's like say your iTunes account. You know, you bought all of these songs. Say your parents did, and they pass on. Suddenly, you know, what happens to the ownership of this? Because now it's property. So it's a new frontier that we're having to deal with. How do you deal with what do they call it? Electronic assets.
Yes. Digital assets. Yeah, and you don't think about it, but if you've got, this one gentleman was testifying, said, I've got 20 years worth of email, and I'm going, you really ought to clean out your email inbox. But if you have things that you may not want somebody else to see, how do you protect that after you're gone? What are the kind of processes and laws we need to put into place to do that? So I think it'll come to you next.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm supposed to be doing in this sharing committee is to take a look at our laws, and are they keeping up with all the quick really fast changes that we're seeing
Exactly.
in technology. As much as, people, I think people around here now can't think of how did we operate without computers. I mean, I think when I went to work for the state about 20 years ago for the first time, we had WAN computers. I don't know if people still know what a WAN computer is.
I do not.
And they were already in bankruptcy, and that computer was sitting on my desk at one of the departments.
One thing to note about the Senate is, I remember when it was one fax machine in the Senate, and then each office got a fax machine. Well, we just did a phone upgrade, and so the fax machines are now obsolete. If you send a fax to us, it gets turned to a PDF and sent to our email.
Yeah.
See, so the fax machine, we saw it come, we saw it have its useful life, and now it's gone.
Exactly.
On another topic, you were bringing up confirmations. The Senate confirms all the governor's appointments. This year is kind of different because some of the deputy directors need to be confirmed as well. What do you think of this?
Well, I think that it's something that the Attorney General's office has always sort of knew in the back of its mind that there was a little bit of a disconnect between the plain language of the Constitution, which is all governor's appointees need to be confirmed. And over the years, the statutes have not specified how certain deputies are appointed, and so they've been appointed by the governor, and we have not confirmed them. And this is the first year where we will be. For those that don't have a statutory authority of appointment by an executive board or commission or by the director, are going to need to be confirmed. So I think some of us are going to be pretty busy.
Yeah. It's curious. DCCA, which is the department that I have jurisdiction over, it's only the director. So none of the deputies are confirmed. But you have others, Department of Health and some of the others that have responsibility. And apparently it came to the forefront when Director Fuddy passed away. They had to look to see what was of the deputies and the department, which one was first in line, like a first deputy, because not all of the deputies in the department are designated in that fashion.
Well, for this portion, we can have like an open discussion on any particular pieces of legislation or issues that you'd like to touch on and highlight to the public.
Wow, we got so much. We're at the beginning of the session, so there's all the ideas that came in. I got a call from Maui about a bill, and they gave me a bill number, and it was one of my bills, and I could, for the life of me, couldn't figure out what it was. So, we don't, what happens to us, I think, is we don't remember the numbers, but we know the content.
Right.
So, a lot of times somebody would say, that bill that does this, and oh yes, okay, that one. But we have a lot of very interesting concepts moving this session. I know you have some bills, Roz, that are dealing with one that abolishes undersea cable.
Yes.
Yeah, you have yours is particular. Your committee is particular because you're dealing with all the licensing. So all of the very big issues ends up in your committee.
So I think one important bill that Roz introduced is something that's been sort of sitting out there for a long time that has not been resolved, and that is the independent contractors or Department of Labor. Over the years, they've always treated, I suppose, even sole proprietors as employees for purposes of themselves, meaning then that they would need to pay the assessments that are required for all employers in the state. And so it sort of caught up on some of the businesses and business people who operate in Maui. And so I think you introduced the bill.
I did.
I'm going to hear later, I think later next week, and if we pass it, we'll come to you.
So that's really kind of how it works. It starts out in what committee has the primary subject matter, and then it'll go, usually the three last committees are Judiciary and Labor, Consumer Protection, and Ways and Means.
The big three.
The big three. So Maui's fortunate to have representation, our chairs of the big three. But the other nice thing about the Maui delegation is when we're looking at construction projects in Maui County, when we're looking at grants and aids by agencies that are operating in Maui County, we really all work together to try to make sure that, we pool our leverage, so to speak, so that we can have a bigger impact for the county and really make a difference in the kind of programs and funding that come back to the county. So we're fortunate in that regard. People come in to see us and want to talk about issues, and we know that as they're talking to our colleagues, they're passing along the same message.
Sounds fortunate for Maui as well.
Yeah, well, and that's the beautiful thing of our working relationship is that it's Maui County, so Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe is always considered in the mix. And, I rely heavily on these two senators to help me carry what all of the islands need. So we look at it as one, we look at it countywide, and we support things in each other's districts because it supports all of Maui County. So a lot of the things, like let's just take the ferry terminal in Kaunakakai, that the community needed and was built. It was built because the three of us worked very hard to get that there. It was not just one person, it was the group of us and then the group in the House side that made sure that was there. So things like that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the more interesting bills this year. We have a number of marijuana bills.
Yes. To legalize, decriminalize, or just relate to medical marijuana.
Right. And a number of the decriminalization bills are in Judiciary Committee. Some of the others, the dispensaries and others were with Roz and with Josh. But the point is that these are now mainstream discussions. We're talking about medicine, we're talking about its use as a medicine. There's some bills to move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 as on a controlled substance. And then there's some bills that simply say, like Colorado or other places, simply legalize it and then set up a taxing regulatory regime for it. So, that is another big topic this year at the legislature.
Anything else, Senators, that you want to talk about?
Gee, there's so many interesting things. Go back to the hospital. We have, the three of us have introduced a measure that would enable a public-private partnership to work with Maui Memorial and all of the fine nurses, doctors, technicians, and other staff that work at the hospital to make sure that they can continue to do the things that they do. But it's been interesting this year to see more people, I think, try to understand the financing of healthcare, how difficult it is, and to really try to come up with an understanding of how this is something that's not just important for Maui County, but it's important for the rest of the state, because we do have a doctor shortage, we do have a nursing shortage, and a lot of our docs are aging out, so they want to retire. So we need to have things like the residency program that's operating on the Big Island, some other programs that we're trying to put in place to help make sure that we get more advanced practice registered nurses and other folks. So it's an area that I've always been very interested in. I'm just delighted to see that so many of our colleagues are taking an interest in that as well, because without health, you really don't have a good and vibrant community. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping that we're going to make some real progress on this session.
Well, you're also taking on a very tough issue on trying to make the connector really work.
Yes.
And I think in some ways we're all sort of responsible because we were here when it was being set up. So, we're sort of counting on you on this.
Well, actually, the auditor probably did us a favor by giving us a very, shall we say, straightforward and pointing out where the problems have been. And the thing that I'm delighted when we have our hearing next week that looks at that audit, we'll be able to show the progress that the connectors made and some of the issues that the auditor pointed out have actually been addressed by the new leadership. So I'm optimistic that we'll find that right balance. There's over 17,000 persons that have signed up with the connector to get their health insurance, compared to 2,000 in all of last year.
Wow.
So we're really making great strides, and with some of the compact of free association immigrants that are in our state legally that will go from Medicaid to service on the connector, this really gives us an opportunity to help raise their wellness and their well-being, at the same time getting some federal match to pay for them in a way that couldn't be allowed if they stayed on our Medicaid roll. So I think it's a real win-win for this segment of our population, as well as just to try to improve the health of everybody, giving them access to more affordable health care.
You know, there's another bill that the Maui delegation introduced. It's dealing with the tax credits for replacing cesspools.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's a very important one for our districts and our county. Last year there was a big push to try and mandate that you switch from cesspools to septic. So we're trying another approach, saying, well, let's do some tax credits to encourage people to voluntarily switch out the cesspools. And I think a number of people will go for something like that.
And I think Senator Baker should also get some credit for working with the Department of Health to really push them to look at, well, where can you really do something about the problems they've identified? Because I think we all recognize that cesspools are risky near the shoreline. But instead of attacking every single cesspool, we should look at the riskiest areas first.
And the Department of Health told us when they were going to go out to hearing, and we kind of nudged them to say, you've got to come to Molokai, you've got to come to Maui and have a real hearing, not just a teleconference, that there's federal money that may be available. So it's not just going to be general fund money, but there's Clean Water Act money that could be used for this sort of thing and really help us to target the areas that are most vulnerable, our near shore or over aquifer areas that might still have cesspools.
Well, we have a couple minutes left, literally a couple minutes. Any final thoughts on closing?
Well, actually, we're filming right in the middle of, I guess, one of the busier weeks, because there's some internal deadlines coming up, and so we I think we've been sitting in hearings for most of the day, and I have to apologize to my colleagues for being late, because I was stuck in the hearing.
Anything else, Senators?
Well, we'll have a few more shows during the session, highlight what's going on in the bills that are moving. So, as always, the three of us, please contact any one of us about issues as bills going through. A lot of times, just if you're going to email about a bill, just give us a little bit about the content as well as the number. That would help quite a bit.
Yeah.
Senator Baker?
Well, it is a busy week. We've got what we call a lateral deadline, with the bills have to move from the first committee to the second committee. But in all of the hearings that I've been in so far, we are getting good testimony. You can go through the website to submit testimony. So if people haven't had a chance to follow some of the things that are happening, please go to our Capitol website, www.capitol.hawaii.gov, and you'll be able to contact us and comment.
And participate.
Yeah, actually, and it's really good because you can now have it send you notices when a bill is up for hearing. So you just, it'll let you know that the bill's up.
We actually have a very good site. It's easy to navigate. It's very easy. Senators, I know you're busy. Thank you so much for joining us again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again on this episode of Maui Manao. Aloha and mahalo.